All right, let's get started this morning. Welcome to Dayton, and welcome to our D-Star class. We call it D-Star InfoCon. This started a few years ago. There have been several D-Star training and academies around the country. There have been Tallahassee, Central Florida, Washington State, Atlanta. So we try to scale that down here for Dayton, but give you a good session. We're going to start, the first hour is going to be kind of an intro to D-Star. We'll take those who are new to D-Star through that. We'll refresh your knowledge for those who are more experienced and may have forgotten a thing or two. My name is John Davis, WB4QDX. Helping out will be Ed Woodrick, WA4YIH, and Chris Fowler, K4FH. And this probably wouldn't have happened without Amy Woodrick in the background, KE4IKF, who always helps us and keeps all of us in line. All right, for intro to D-Star, first of all, what is it? It's an open standard. One of the great myths about D-Star is that it's proprietary, especially people will say it's proprietary to Icom. It is not. It was a standard that was developed by the Japan Amateur Radio League. It does use a proprietary chip, the A&B vocoder chip from DVSI. It would have been very easy, no, let me correct that. It would have been very difficult to come up with a open source decoder, vocoder for that, and then get it into silicon, and get it into a radio that, like the new radios that we have here. Rather than try to reinvent the wheel, an inexpensive chip was used to do the vocoding function, which you have to have, and DVSI does this for just about all of the digital modes, including the commercial modes of P25, Moto Turbo, and some of those others. Icom, however, has been the first manufacturer to manufacture complete equipment for that. And I do congratulate them in coming up with not only the radios, the handhelds and the mobiles, but also the repeater equipment as well. So from an infrastructure side, that's really helped D-Star to grow. Now there are some other third-party vendors offering products, and we'll talk about a few of those today, and I think there's even some news coming out about some others today as well in one of the forums. D-Star, very simply, transmits as digital data. You're modulating a carrier digitally, and it's transmitted over the air at 4,800 bits per second. Now that's broken down into 2,400 bits for voice, another 1,200 bits for forward error correction of the voice. So you have a total of 3,600 bits of that 4,800 that is used for voice transmission. Why have the forward error correction? As you have fading, signals bouncing around, getting into weak areas, it also, the forward error correction allows you to reconstruct that at a much lower level, lower signal level. The thing that most people have to get used to in starting with D-Star and any form of digital modulation is that it's very consistent. You're going to hear kind of the same quality all along. Most of us have probably talked on FM repeaters for a number of years now, and as you link those repeaters together, you'll hear a lot of squeaks and squawks and beeps and boops. But you don't hear that on D-Star as you link them together. We'll talk about how you link. D-Star is one of the digital schemes that is truly a narrowband signal. It occupies around 6.25 kilohertz, which is about half of that of an FM signal. It's also half of what some of the other digital modulations that are used in commercial, like P25 and Moto Turbo, it is half, even though they are called narrowband equivalent. Now, why are they called narrowband equivalent when they're not truly narrowband? Well, they are using a scheme called TDMA, or time division multiple access, which puts two signals on one carrier. So if it's occupying 12.5 kilohertz with two signals, they call that 6.25 or narrowband equivalent. But you are still transmitting a wider signal, roughly equivalent to an FM signal over the air. And that has implications as far as frequency coordination, repeater coordination as well. Now with D-Star you can operate simplex, you can operate through a local repeater, or you can link to other repeaters. One of the things that some people will say is a negative about D-Star is it has to have the internet. That is only true if you want to link repeaters together. You can still go radio to radio with voice and data. You can go through a local repeater, but if you want to go further and link to other repeaters, that is done over the internet. D-Star transmits data along with a data stream. Remember we said of the 3,600 bits of the 4,800 bits per second. With the voice, and in some cases that's a good thing, in other cases you just want the data by itself. But that can be done on the 2 meter, 440, and 1.2 bands. As we get into data in our third hour, we'll show you the real advantage of how you connect this together, because you don't need a TNC or any kind of external equipment other than your radio, a cable, and your computer to do data. Now if you want the higher speed of data, on the 1.2 gigahertz band there is a radio called the ID1. I'll show you my ID1, and we'll talk a little bit about that again in the third hour. But you can get speeds up to 128 kilobits, and it's Ethernet type data. There is actually an RJ45 connector coming out of the ID1 that can either plug into an access point, a router, or your computer for running as like an Ethernet bridge, either to the internet through a repeater, or you could just connect two radios together to connect two networks together. DPRS is kind of the digital equivalent of APRS. Are you all familiar with APRS? What it does, basically transmits your position. Now with DPRS, the advantage is I'm not transmitting on a separate frequency. I don't have to have a separate radio, and I don't have to have a TNC or a tiny track or something like that to be able to do DPRS. If I have a GPS connected to my radio, or I have one of the radios that has a built-in GPS, then that can transmit my position along with my voice without any external equipment required. Now one of the great features that D-Star has that really makes kind of the magic of D-Star is the linking, the flexible repeater linking. And without saying bad things about some of the other digital technologies, one of the things that makes D-Star unique and very advantageous to amateur radio, first, it was designed for amateur radio, not commercial applications, and brought down into, adapted to amateur radio. So it's under total user control. I can link a repeater anywhere in the world. I'm not confined to talk groups that are predefined by system administrators. We're doing linking. I can unlink a repeater, I can link it somewhere else, I can link to a reflector. Now, what are reflectors? Reflectors are really just conference bridges. If you connect a repeater or connect your DV access point or DV dongle or hotspot to a conference bridge, also known as a reflector, then anything going into that comes out on every device that is connected to it. So there are over 60 D+ repeaters right now, or there are exactly 60 right now in operation worldwide. There are other types of reflectors available, but I'm not going to try to go into those today. I'll stick with the D+ reflectors. And in each one of those, there are 5 modules, so 5 separate conference bridges, actually 4 plus an echo function. Now referred to the DV dongle, the DV access point, and DV node adapters for hotspots. Those are some other devices, either radio or non-radio related, that you can use to access the D-Star network via the internet. With a DV dongle, it's very similar to Echolink. I call it Echolink on steroids because you have so many more functions. And we'll spend a little more time on those. D-Star continues to grow. I was still very surprised when I tabulated and had to go back and finish and add 2012 to the mix, that it does continue to grow. And as of May 9th, I had to do a presentation down in Savannah, Georgia last weekend, so I had to put this information together. We've got over 1,000 gateways. Now, remember, a gateway can be 1 to 4 repeaters. So if you take an average of that, there's probably almost 20, and probably as of this day, there's probably 2,300 repeaters worldwide on D-Star, and over half of those are in the U.S. And there are over 28,000 registered users on the U.S. Trust Server. And we'll talk about registration because that's one area that can be misunderstood. Reflectors and nets. I said 60 D plus reflectors. Number 60 was added just a few weeks ago as a Tennessee reflector. If you look at different reflectors around the world, they kind of have a personality or a flavor. For example, we have reflector 30 that we put up in the Atlanta area. It's in a commercial data center. It started out and is intended to be a Georgia reflector supporting emergency communications because that's what it was funded by. However, it has become so popular that at any given time you'll have 50 to 75 different repeaters around the world connected to it. And between reflector 1C and reflector 30C, you will have, those are the two busiest reflectors and modules in the world. You'll also see a lot of nets that are cropping up. And you can get a complete net listing. You're going to hear me refer to this website quite a bit this morning. www.dstarinfo.com. dstarinfo.com. dstarinfo.com. With the reflectors on it. Okay. Net, if you go to dstarinfo.com, you'll see several tabs across the top. And there'll be one for nets. And you can get a complete listing of all the nets that we've been made aware of, and there's a bunch of them. And it'll tell you where they're linked. You can also find out where your local repeater is connected if you will go to the link and look at this one near the bottom, which if I can do this without destroying things. If you want to find out what is connected to a reflector, you'll go to put in the reflector number in the format REF and 3 digits, dstargateway.org. Most of them you don't have to put in the status.html, but that will give you a listing of all the repeaters that are connected to a certain reflector. Most of the repeaters themselves also have a dashboard page that if you substitute the repeater call sign, such as wd4str.dstargateway.org, it will tell you if it will show you A, B, C, D, E. It will show where that repeater is connected. It will also show any other devices that are connected, such as dongles, DVAPs, and node adapters. And it will show you a last heard on that repeater. So that can be a handy thing. Now, if you go to either the reflector or a repeater page and you see the last heard list, you may notice 1 or 2 of those will be in bright orange, bold orange. There's actually a hyperlink. If you click on those, that's someone who's transmitting their GPS position. If you click on that, it will take you to a Google map and show where that person last sent their position. So there's a way that you can see if someone is transmitting where they are going. Your question?
Yes, I noticed that on Reflector, each target from Australia, when you do the GPS, it doesn't just amber color, just blue color.
Okay, some may, but is it still a hyperlink?
Yes.
Yeah, the question is that reflector 3? 3 Charlie, I think that's in Australia. Instead of being a bold orange link, I think theirs is a bold blue link. But you'll see it differentiated from any of the others on there. It's fun to click. I was looking last night at, I think it was Reflector 30 Charlie, and there were a few people that were already in Dayton, and I could see their hotel where they were staying because their position showed there. All right, that's going to be our first segment. Let me bring up the next area here. While they play with the lights. Good job, guys. Let's talk about D-Star equipment. What is available? You have radios, in that there's mobile and handhelds, and they're produced commercially by Icom as one you can go buy off the shelf. The DV dongle is a non-radio device. I'll say it's similar to Echolink, but you get a whole lot more capabilities. It's a little device. I have one here. It might be hard to see in this dark up here, but it's just a little small blue plastic box, connects to your computer with USB. There's also a DV access point, which creates a low-power hotspot. So then you would use your radio then to roam around the area and be able to access the internet and issue the commands. And then there are node adapters. Come back tonight and listen to what we're saying about node adapters. These are GMSK modems, which can connect to other radios, like any radio that's got a 9600 baud packet port. If they've got the 6-pin mini DIN on the back of the radio, you can connect it to some kind of a radio, or you can get in and try to get near the modulator and the discriminator to get a pretty flat audio, and you can convert an FM transceiver to a hotspot that would be higher powered than, say, a DV access point. Let's go over some of the radios, and I think we had a full complement of ownership of radios here in the room today. Most of our radios are dual band, except some of the very early ones, and then the ID31A that was produced. One of the new ones recently is 70 centimeters only. The ID1 is a single band. It is 23 centimeters or the 1.2 gigahertz band. But that also allows, that's a very specialized radio, and that allows high-speed data access as well. All of the radios have a built-in serial port. Now, it's a simple serial port, 3 pins, transmit data, receive data, and ground. But it is an RS-232 type serial port. So it's very easy to get in for if you just wanted to go keyboard to keyboard with data, or use some of the more comprehensive programs like DRATs, which we'll get into in our third hour as well today. Some GPS is built into radios, such as the 31 to 51. It comes, you have an external antenna with a 2820. And then you also can have a GPS speaker mic for, say, the 80 and the 92, or you can add an external GPS that has the NMEA formatted data coming out as a serial port that you can connect in as well to do GPS. The mobiles started with a 2200. You could add the D-Star board to it. And make it one of the early D-Star radios. The 800, the ID800 was also one of the early ones. The 800 was updated to the 880 and added some new features. The 2820, I call it the top of the line because it does have all of the features. It's a dual band, dual receive radio as well. I've got a couple of them. I replaced my dual band, dual receive equivalent radio of another flavor so that I could have the D-Star equivalent of that. You can also do cross-banding on that one. That works quite well. Going to the handhelds, the 91 AD was the first one that came out. Still a good radio, dual band, dual receive. The 92 came out a year or so later than that. It's kind of an update. And some features such as the GPS speaker mic. It's a little larger than the 91, which gave it a little more heat sink. One of the issues people would talk about with the 91 AD is if you're running 5 watts for a long period of time, it'll get hot in your hand and reduce that issue. The 80 came out as a lower cost handheld, and it's a real good buy right now as well. But it is a single receive, but again, it's a dual band radio, and they do have a GPS speaker mic that is available for it. The ID31A was the first in kind of the new generation. It came out a year ago, a little over a year and a half ago now, I would say. I think right at Christmas or first of the year of last year. Although it was 70 centimeters only, it had a lot of good features, one being waterproof. You had an opportunity to put a micro SD card in it for storing different memory configurations and a lot of other things. But the user interface was what was kind of the remarkable change with the 31. And introducing expanded memories for DR memories, and we'll talk in the second hour about how to use DR memories and some of the other functions. The 51A is the latest one that came out right around the first of this year. I love this radio. I've got one. It is all the features of the 31A. It's very slightly larger, very slightly, has a little bit larger display, but it is dual band, dual receive, and has the user interface. So as the new user interface, so as you get into some of the newer features and using those, it's very quick to move around from repeater to repeater with the DR functionality. The ID1, and I'll get mine out when we talk about in more detail the ID1. You can do regular FM on 1.2 gigahertz. You can do low-speed data, just like all the others in the 1.2 band. But one of the great features of the ID1 is its high-speed data mode. Now this is only transmitting and receiving in the 1.2 gigahertz band. And the high-speed data is Ethernet compatible. The DV dongle. Do any of you have a DV dongle? A few around. This is an item that is produced by Internet Labs, Robin Cutshaw, AA4RC. Most of the major ham dealers are carrying this device. It provides access to the D-Star network, repeaters, reflectors, if you don't have a radio. It connects via USB to your laptop or desktop computer. It uses the sound card internally for your microphone and speaker. Some people try to use, say, just an internal speaker and microphone on their laptop, and it doesn't sound real good most of the time. So would advise you getting some type of a PC headset for it. One of them that's real good, I really like, and it seems to sound good whenever I've heard it, is made by Logitech. It's a USB headset. There is some software that will run on your computer that allows you to start it up, where do you want to connect, and adjust your audio, and has a bar graph for audio levels. I hear some people sometimes with a DV dongle and their audio might be real low or real compressed. There is a little bar meter on there. Watch that meter. You got a question? It is. It will run on all versions of Windows, probably not Windows 3.1. Hams will be still running that, I know. But all the ones, Windows 98, I guess it will still run on 98, but at least XP, Vista, 7, and it will run on Windows 8. Good luck. There are rumors that the developers of the DV dongle are also trying to come out where you can connect to an Android tablet or an Android smartphone for your DV dongle, since it would provide internet access and you could use your tablet or smartphone instead of a computer for the dongle. And I think there may be even some other announcements coming by, so stop by the Internet Labs booth on the arena floor to find out a little bit more if you have any other questions about it. The DV access point was kind of the second device that Internet Labs came out with. They took out the vocoder chip, but added a 10 milliwatt transceiver. And this is available in either the 2-meter VHF version or the 70 centimeter UHF version. It also connects to your PC via USB port. It has a little rubber duck, stubby duck antenna on it. And with the 10 milliwatts, it'll give you about 300 feet of range. So where this is really nice, where you would be confined to your desktop and a headset with the dongle, this allows you to take your handheld, roam around the hotel, roam around your house with it, or get out in the yard or something and be able to connect. It's very handy if you're not within range currently of a D-Star repeater, or you just want a good signal where you are. You know, you might have a little bit of spotty coverage around where you are. So works very well. Again, there's software that runs on your computer that starts it up, but you use the regular D-Star commands through your radio to do linking and unlinking and call sign routing and things like that. I'll talk just very briefly about DV node adapters, which are also called GMSK modems. GMSK is the modulation technique that is used by D-Star. While you can make a D-Star radio out of this and some other devices, one of the first applications of these boards was to make a higher powered hotspot radio out of a regular FM radio. And you can do that very successfully. I've used my Yaesu FT8800. I've used my Yaesu FT857. I've used my Kenwood TMG 707A as a hotspot radio, and it basically lets you connect through the 9600 baud packet port. It's real handy if you have the 6-pin mini-DIN standard data connector on the back of your radio, but you do want to go in on the 9600 baud packet port and make sure your radio is set for 9600 packet, because at 9600 that was the higher speed port for packet data, and the reason it will work is because it's closer to the modulator directly and closer to the discriminator on receive. So because you're sending in a digitally modulated signal, that gets to a flatter point in the radio, and it will work very well. One of the producers of this you'll see here at the show is Moencom, M-O-E-N-C-O-M-M. Jim Moen will be at our session tonight and talk a little bit about the starboards, or the GMSK modems as they're called. If you ever want to know what a typical D-Star repeater architecture looks like, here it is if it's an Icom repeater. You have the controller, the top module, the RP2C, and it can control up to 4 different modules, RF modules. And if you see in this configuration, the second one down is the RP2D, which is the 23 centimeter 1.2 gig data module, high-speed data. The 2V right below it is the 1.2 voice module. The RP2000V is the 2-meter module, and the 4000 is the 70 centimeter module. Now, they can function as a standalone repeater, and you can have any combination up to 4 of those modules. Now, what you'll need to add to get the full functionality of a D-Star repeater is a PC of some kind that is running Linux. It'll run the CentOS or CentOS, whichever way you pronounce Linux distribution. And there's also some other third-party software that runs on there to support the repeater linking, D+, also supporting the use of DV dongles, DV access points. There's the DPRS software, which runs on there as well to gate your position data to the APRS internet network, and then it will connect to the internet. Now keep in mind, you don't have to connect it to the internet. You can be a standalone repeater, just like an FM repeater. But if you use the gateway function and you go to the internet, then you do have a lot more functionality along with it. Yes? Yeah, I think you could. You can do multiple 2-meter modules. You can do multiple, UHF modules if you do the frequency separation and everything. And 1.2, that's an interesting combination because you have so much spectrum available for you at 1.2. You could do multiple data or multiple or combination of voice and data as well. All right, there's a little bit on equipment. We're doing pretty well on time, and maybe that's a reminder to me. We've got one more section I want to go over before we take a quick break. And this is on call sign registration. This is one of the most misunderstood areas of D-Star. So I want to clear up some myths today. Are all of you registered? Is there anyone who is not registered? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We'll get you registered properly because you'll know how to do it. First off, why would you want to register? Registering your call sign is not necessary if you just want to talk locally on your repeater. But I don't think you want to stop there. So you want to register your call sign, and you do that through a local repeater, any repeater. If you want to use a DV dongle or a DV access point, you do absolutely need to register. Now, ideally, you'd want to register on your local or the closest system to you. Here's a fallacy in that. I wish it worked a little differently, but not all system administrators are as diligent about this. I'm trying to figure a nice way to say this. When you complete step 1 of the registration, and we'll go through all 3 steps, that's only the first part and you're not registered. But most system administrators have no clue that you have registered. Many have a message on the registration page which tells you to send them an email that you have registered. That's the best way to do it because we've had people that register, they don't hear anything for days, weeks, months, and then they make the fatal mistake. And they try to register on another system because this one was not responsive. You want to register on one and only one system. Let me emphasize that point about 15 times. One and only one system. Now, you must complete the whole 3-step process before you are registered. So if you have registered on one system, started the registration process, and did not get an answer, please try to find out who the system administrator is to be able to delete you. Question?
So a related question on that. Does system stability come into this? Like the repeater comes up and register on that. If that repeater simply goes away, what happens?
Good question. The question was, if you register on a repeater and it goes away, what happens to your registration? Unfortunately, that can be a big problem.
If you have that problem, the trust team will be here this evening, and they'll be able to help.
Here's what I'll add to what Ed said and repeat it. If that repeater just goes away, you're still registered. But that registration may get canceled when that repeater registration gets canceled. I've got a problem with that with a repeater in Georgia right now I've got to work through. Because a repeater is going off the air, and there are probably a couple of dozen people who are registered on that repeater. That's going to have to be handled by the trust server team which is kind of the master database of all of this. As Ed said, some representatives of the Texas Interconnect team, which is the people who maintain the trust servers in Dallas, will be here tonight. And if you run into that, feel free to talk to them. They will help you through it. That's one of the things that is unfortunate. People take down repeaters. They may lose their site. They may get mad and take their toys and go home, whatever the case may be. And your registration is in jeopardy in that case. If you run into, I'm going to volunteer something I may regret later. If you run into that you just can't get registered or you don't know who to register to, contact me and we'll register you on one of the systems in Georgia. And my email address is wb4qdx@arrl.net. Or you can send it to info@dstarinfo.com. And that way more than one person can handle it. Another question?
As a user, can we deregister ourselves?
No, the system administrator for that site or the trust server team will have to deregister you. Now, remember, registration is a three-step process. Let's go through it. Step one, you go to, hopefully, the nearest or your local D-Star repeater. Here's a link. You'll substitute call sign up there for the local call sign of that repeater. And you must use that complete, HTTPS, and the D, capital D on dstar.do at the end. That must be exact. And that will take you to a typical page like this. The highlighted box down there in yellow, if you're a new user, you want to press that button to register. When you get to the next page, sometimes they'll have kind of a agree to these terms or something like that, and hopefully they might have some information about who to contact that you have started the registration process. You're going to agree to that with the yes box. You're going to put in your call sign, your name, your email address, and your password twice. And then you're going to hit the OK button. Now, once you do that, you've completed the first step of the process, step one. The next thing is, hopefully you're able to get in touch with your system administrator or you've contacted someone who can help you, and they will approve you. They'll validate and verify that you are who you say you are and you are legitimate with that call sign, and do due diligence to make sure that you are licensed to operate. Again, you may need to send an email to the administrator. Once you are notified that you are approved, you can log back in to the same site, and you're going to want to add a terminal. Now, here's where some confusion comes in. In most of the cases, you only need to add one terminal, and to do that, you will check that box, go to the column called Initial, and you will hit a space key. That's all. Just hit the space key one time. Then go over to the right, and you just need to put in a PC name. This is kind of like a DNS alias. And so you want to put in, it's got to be, I think, at least 8 characters, I believe it is. Here I've got only 6, so it's probably only 6. They must all be lowercase. The only special character is, I think, a dash or hyphen. And sometimes I will put in my call sign -D star, just something unique to fill it in, and your call sign being a part of that's going to make it unique. Now, in the majority of cases, and I will say probably 99% of them, you only need to register one terminal. Some of you have registered through some of the dealers, and he'll register you with a A, a D, an N, a M, and all these other terminals. You don't need to do that normally. And the reason is, and where the confusion comes in, is if you get a DV dongle, you may put in your call sign and not put that suffix letter in, whatever it is, or you may do the opposite, and then you're going to be sending emails, my DV dongle or my DV access point won't transmit. I can't get on the network. So I'm going to tell you for 99, and I'll even probably say 99.9% of the cases, add a terminal with just a space, and that is all. And then you're going to hit update to confirm, and then you are registered. Now, it's going to take maybe a couple of hours for that registration to propagate to all the systems worldwide, but it will. Because you registered on one, you are now registered on all systems around the world. And for 99.9% of the time, that one is all you need. About the only time that you will need to put a separate character in is there anybody in here other than Ed? Because Ed has 2 of everything. Is there anyone in here that has more than one ID1? Okay, there are people that do that. And in that case, you may need to add a separate terminal. Now, in y'all's case, Donna, you probably have them under 2 different call signs, don't you? Or are they all under you? But if you have 2 ID1s that you want to put under your call sign, you will need to register a second terminal, because remember on this page, there were these IP addresses that were listed. If you ever use an ID1, you need to know what that IP address is. And since an ID1 operates with the IP protocol, if you have more than one ID1, you'd have more than one terminal. So you could put a letter designation in there. Yes, sir.
I'm registered, fully registered and all that. My question is,
If you go back where you was talking about where the mistake, we have to use a space bar. Where did you mean? Can you you said you hit the space bar somewhere when you're registering?
Yes, when you add the terminal, when you're adding a terminal, and this is your second time logging back in after you've been initially approved by the system administrator, you're going to want to check that box.
Right.
This box is going to look like that before you do anything to it. And you're just going to want to tab or highlight with your mouse to that box, hit the space bar one time.
There'll be a box next to that number 1 call sign.
Exactly. There will be a box. You use it.
After you hit the space bar under initial.
Under initial, you will hit the space bar, just put one space.
Okay.
And then go to the right and fill in the PC name. That's all you have to do. One more question.
So if you have one scenario where, my understanding is this is individual.
This is for individual registration.
So in the scenario of having, like, say, 10 pieces of plug here, we still have, 30 members, they all registered in the system as 30 individual registrations, but it's not going to.
Yes. Now the question is, if you have club equipment, and you may have, let's say you have 10 2820s or 9280s or whatever. And how do you operate that? Now, you can do this with the club. The individuals should register because they can go ahead and use any radio anytime. But remember, the call sign that the system is looking for to validate is the call sign being transmitted by that radio. Now, if that's a club-owned equipment, you may want to put the club call sign in there. But the club call sign will still need to be registered and approved. So if your club call is W4DOC, you could put that in each radio because that's what goes over the air, that's what gets validated that it is a legitimate, registered, proper user.
And the only time that gets complicated is if those are ID ones.
Yes. Yeah. If you have multiple ID ones, you wouldn't want them, well, you could register multiple terminals, remember, under that same call. You could add an A, B, C, D, all of those for the multiple ID ones because most of the time people are going to use an ID one for data. There are some people that'll do it for voice, but for data mostly. And so that's kind of in the background, but we'll have to have the proper call sign in there. Wayne?
So if one puts up a hotspot, it has to be registered.
The hotspot, well, you have to be registered if your call sign is on that hotspot. Or if you have a club call on the hotspot, that call sign would have to be registered. You're already registered, and if you're just putting up a hotspot, it's really kind of irrelevant. Your call, it's only used to validate to allow that hotspot to go on the network. What's actually going through the hotspot is the call sign of the station, the radio that's going through there. One more.
Okay, the ID1 requires registration if you can do that. What about an ID100 with the 1.2 model?
Yes.
Same thing?
Just one registration.
Well, one registration. It does require registration. It does not require registration to use D-Star on HF.
No, I understand that.
But if you're,
Registration is only for the data mode of the ID1. 9100 doesn't do the data modes, and therefore it doesn't.
yeah, that's correct. You can operate 1.2 data, 1.2 on the ID1, and that would require registration. Going through,
Only for the data, the double registration.
oh, the double registration. Okay, let's.
You're never required to register for voice. You're never required to, only to do repeater functions such as link.
Right. So if you're doing 1.2 voice on a 9100 through a repeater, and you want to do linking and functions, your call sign would need to be registered.
That's automatic.
Right, the first one.
Just so I understand, like I said, I put up a hotspot on my call sign, using my radio, the server gets both at the exact same time, those call signs, it don't care, there's no conflict.
If you have a hotspot with your call sign on it, and you use your radio with your call sign going through there, that works just fine.
And if I'm in California and somebody's using mine, of course my ID would come through, there is no conflict if it's
No.
the same time. Okay.
No, it's only using the call sign on the node adapter or a DV dongle or a DV access point for validation of that. The radio going through a DV access point or a node adapter sends its call sign and it has its own authentication. All right. We've covered that. See, I told you registration was going to generate some questions.
And the other one, because I got a friend that just bought the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the register for a repeater comes back. This information in there, which is only going to use the dongle, would be the check mark, space, and whatever.
The PC name. That is correct. Yeah. If you're a dongle user and you are not registered, you can receive, but you'll never be able to transmit. That's the first indication. Someone will buy a dongle and they can't transmit. Did you register? No.
Concerning the access dongles and etc. I was told through my radio, I can call sign locate. I was told that the dongle, the access, you cannot call sign locate.
You cannot call sign route, and we'll talk about call sign routing. the good and bad of call sign routing. You cannot do that through the dongle or I think the access point either, because you can't call sign route directly to that device on a DV access point. Okay, let's take a quick break so we can try to get back on schedule. About 5 minutes and we'll start back up. It's 9:14. At 9:19 and 30 seconds we'll start back.
Excuse me, John. You're having a meeting in here again.